Welcome in to another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I'm Bennett Conlon, joined by Jack Fitzpatrick. Jack, we are unexpectedly talking about a loss, and I sound maybe a little too excited, but I think the content this week has been good, which for the true sickos like me who love their weekly content, I think it creates a very interesting wrinkle, little interesting time capsule for JMU football.
A trap game that lived up to all of the expectations of it being a trap game. ULM muckied up the game. They slowed it down. They won the time of possession battle. They did everything that we were hoping they wouldn't do. They pulled out the win. But then it's just so many storylines coming out of that game. How do the Dukes respond on a short week? They have the Chanticleers, who they've historically dominated. And by historically, I mean the last 2 years. How do they respond with that? How do you respond with another night game? Is that a little wrinkle into all of this? All of their struggles this year have been at night. Is there something real to that? There's so many storylines that are coming out of it. And there's some things I got to get off my chest. It's been kind of boiling underneath the surface since the loss on Saturday night. So I'm super, super excited for today's episode.
It should be a great one.
You know what else is a great one?
Bet Online.
Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share at $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to Bet Online today to get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here.
The world's most trusted betting platform. You can just say anything these days.
Hopefully they don't air check us.
We also got to plug the pod with Delvin. This was a great listen. I played golf yesterday, Tuesday, October 8th.
We were supposed to record a podcast, but you had the lowest people in front of you.
I kind of ruined our schedule. It went longer than I expected. Played 9 holes with Gary and Marty, these two older gentlemen. Just a delight to meet those two and play with them. Back 9, they left. They only wanted to play 9. I was playing 18. I had a later shift Tuesday. This is why we're recording today. Anyway, I play 18 holes. Back 9, I'm just listening to pod, so I have a chance to get through the rest of the podcast with Delvin. I thought you guys made great points onto the house. I thought there was some great conversation there. I thought it was fair. I'm very excited continually that Delvin's working with us.
Yeah, Delvin's been fantastic. You can subscribe to the JMU Sports News Podcast Network right here. You just hit subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. I think follow if you're listening on Spotify. And you'll never miss an episode of To the House because it drops in this same feed every Monday night. And you can check it out full video podcast, which is kind of counterintuitive to what a podcast initially was, but we got the full video of that as well over on our YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, comment, and like on YouTube as well. We drop these full episodes on YouTube, exclusive interviews on our JMU Sports News Network YouTube, along with clips from the podcast. Really fantastic stuff on our YouTube. And you can follow at JMU Sports News on Twitter and Instagram, and JMU to the House on Twitter and Instagram as well. And if you're feeling so kind, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/JMU Sports News. That money may be used for website development. It may be used for buying Bennett a tea, maybe some beer. But mostly it's used to just kind of be put back into JMU Sports News, pay more writers. Our guy Sully's been doing a fantastic job creating content. So whatever you donate, we may use for, to find the cheapest Airbnb in Harrisonburg when we go to a game, but it's mostly used to be put back into JMU Sports News to try and make an even better product. And if you can't buy us a coffee, no hard feelings. Thank you so much for listening. Just be sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. A rating goes an extremely long way. Shout out to the last person who left us a review on Apple Podcast. Was an absolutely great read. I'm not going to spoil it. If you want to read what this guy so eloquently said, leave us a rating on Apple Podcast.
Quite flattering.
Very flattering. Very flattering. And going back, Not sure if you heard that.
We did hear the gong. Yeah, we're ready to talk about the loss.
No, 1 second. Before we talk about the loss, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but to preview it, post-pod, some of the best conversations in a podcasting world happen post-pod when you hit the end recording button.
Mhm.
That's when me and Delvin started talking about the difference in day games and night games.
Sure.
So remind me to get to that when we're kind of talking about
Okay.
the loss a little bit later. But first, we got to recap the loss. Are you ready for the gong again?
Yes. Nice. All right. 21-19. This is disappointing, right? I think obviously, but just to go through
Is it?
the quick play-by-play, they kind of started amazingly. I mean, it's 10-0 like that. Like, it was quick. It was touchdown, interception, field goal, and then they got the ball back and they're driving to maybe go up 17-0 at the end of the first quarter. It was, you could not draw up a better start. And then the last 3 quarters were just rough. Like, real rough.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they give up a defensive touchdown, which sort of swung the game. When they were up 10-7, they were driving, they run quarterback power. I think the defensive lineman sort of reached out and like grabbed Barnett's arm in a spot where it like perfectly let the ball came out, but the ball didn't like dribble out. It like flung to the side right to where a guy scooped it, scored a touchdown. Josh Toner had a pretty nice tackle attempt for an offensive lineman, to be honest with you. Like, he laid his body on the line, almost got there, but didn't. They score the touchdown, and JMU never led the rest of the way at 14-10. They ended up getting a field goal at the end of the half to get to 14-13. I thought in the second half, I think a lot of fans thought that JMU would just sort of make it happen, right? They, hey, it was a fluky touchdown. They're going to be fine. They're going to pull away. And they just didn't.
I truly thought, after watching that first half of action, I turned to my friend Alex as we were watching the game after halftime coming out. I go, JMU's going to win 50-17. Because it felt like, based off of the first 3 drives, maybe I was a little boisterous.
It felt like that.
Well, after the first 3 drives, I was like, maybe this is my simplistic fan brain, but it was just like, get back to what you were doing there. Like, figure out the adjustments the defense made against you, and then just adjust and be back to what you were doing. You drove the ball. A fantastic opening touchdown drive where every single good thing about Alonzo Barnett was on full display. Yeah. His scrambling ability, deep balls, good accuracy, hitting his receivers. Then on the second drive, they went -3 yards, but it was off of an interception. And it was like, all right, you get 3 points off your turnover. Then your next drive, you go 58 yards, turnover on downs. And that's when it was just like, oh. And then things started to kind of unravel. The false starts start to hit. Quick recap, just kind of looking at the box score real quick. Alonzo Barnett went 20 of 47, 251, no touchdowns, no interceptions. This is coming off of the last 2 weeks where he combined for 13 touchdowns, both passing and rushing. He had over 300 total yards last week. I think over 400 total yards the week before that. So a little bit of a downer of a game. He dropped back an insane 53 times.
Yeah.
53 times. JMU's George Pettaway led the way with 62 rushing yards on 13 attempts, averaging 4.8 yards per carry. Wayne Knight, he had 1 carry for 16 yards. Tyler Purdy had 4 carries for 16 yards. And boy, oh boy, was it a mix of designed runs and scrambles. It was a little bit of both, but Barnett led the way with 15 total attempts, racking up just 49 yards of rushing, 3.3 yards per attempt. He lost 34 yards because of sacks.
Yeah. I mean, it was brutal at sometimes, to be honest with you. And then some of it too was like field position was just really, really frustrating. That's an area where JMU had actually been one of the best teams in the country coming into the game. ULM's pretty good at it too. But I was looking at this, the Warhawks, their worst starting field position was their own 25. They started 5 drives at their own 40-yard line or better. Some of those in JMU territory. JMU had 7 drives start inside their own 20.
Their punter, ULM's punter, he's the MVP of that game. He did an
really
exceptional job of flipping the field.
He was phenomenal. And then JMU's decision-making too, right? Where it's like balls at the 40, we're going for it, which I don't hate a lot of the time, but it's different than last year where Signetti would have been like, this is the Ryan Hansen Marshall game kind of thing. Because I think Ryan Hansen, to be honest with you, is at his best when he's punting from like midfield, pinning people, and he's not like blasting 65-yard punts. Like that's not his thing. His thing is the ability to down it inside the 10 very consistently, even if he's punting from like the other side of the 50, which is not quite Chesney's vibe in terms of decision making. So maybe it makes him less of a weapon this year, something to monitor the rest of the season. I thought of all the games to be conservative, this would be the one because ULM is very, very bad offensively, and they still are very bad offensively. He can miss me with all the like, wow, this quarterback looked good stuff. That guy's not that good, man. And that offense is not that good. They scored 14 points. They didn't get 300 yards. He was better than General Booty, who was throwing for like 11 yards a game. But it's not Arch Manning out there. Like the guy is not good. So
Armenta's not good. You're right, but he's not bad either. Like that was, I think, the issue. He didn't really get sacked. Was sacked just once. He had the boneheaded interception to start the game. I think on like the first pass of the game, just a horrible pick. And then he settled into the game and didn't do anything to win the game, didn't do anything to lose the game. And then Ahmad Hardy had 82 rushing yards, and they just kind of just leaned on JMU's team. Like they were snapping the ball under 5 seconds on the play clock. They did everything.
257 yards of offense.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying they're good. What I'm saying is they executed their game plan. They did what they needed to do and had everything go right, or I guess go wrong for JMU.
So I guess, and I'm already like going out of the recap and like what happened. My big thing from this game is sort of the reaction to it. Where
you're jumping all over the outline, going all
I'm going there, and then we can go back to like what happened and all that went wrong. I think what frustrates me is there were some people who were like, oh, like this is a hard game. It's on the road. It's an obscure location. I hear that. I also hear like the New Hampshire comparisons. And I do think there's something to be said for it being like a strange place to get to and it throwing off your rhythm. So I agree with that. But like that New Hampshire team, when we're talking about like JMU had trouble playing at New Hampshire, was like one of the best teams in the FCS, especially at home, for like a multiple decade stretch. And I don't doubt that Brian Vincent is building a better culture at ULM. This wasn't Troy. Troy was hard to get to and like one of the best teams in the Sun Belt the last couple of years. ULM is not winning the West. I don't want to hear anything about ULM winning the West. If ULM wins the West, I'll give $500 to the Montpelier Collective. They're not going to win the West. Like, put that on record, stamp it, hold me to it. I will send receipts if that happens. That team's not winning the West. Okay, they don't have
$500 bet. Wow,
they don't have any offense. You're not winning the West as a one-dimensional turnover reliant team, which is what they are. They beat UAB, which stinks, and the yardage was like the same. They beat Troy, which is garbage, by 4, and then they beat JMU in a game where JMU committed a bunch of like unforced errors and they had a defensive touchdown and they still probably should have lost. And people were like, maybe they're just the best team in the West. They're like 108th in ESPN SP+. Like, I don't think that team's good. I think it's fair for fans to be like, JMU should win that game. I think that's totally fair. I also think it's the other side of the coin, right? Where like it's hard to go undefeated is absolutely true. I agree with that. There were some fans who were like, I saw a few takes out there. They're like, man, I was kind of college football playoff or bust. What? If JMU didn't make the college football playoff, you think the year's a bust? That's crazy. Like JMU moved to the Sun Belt, not for the postseason, but for the regular season. They moved to the Sun Belt so you would have fun games against Coastal Carolina. That's a sellout on a Thursday night. So you would play App at the end of the year. So you have a mid-October game going to Georgia Southern. That was why they made the Sun Belt move, was for the regular season. So if you're not enjoying the regular season matchups, that's on you. Like if you've somehow decided that the 12-team playoff and making for it and probably getting blown out by Tennessee and Knoxville is your dream, you're probably going to be really upset every season. That's not going to happen every year. Boise State's really good. Tulane, Memphis, all these other teams are also good in the group of 5. It's hard to get to the playoff. But on the other side, this team is good enough to get to the playoff, or they were. The schedule is favorable enough to get to the playoff. It's fair to be annoyed that they, I think, blew their playoff chances against a crappy ULM team in a game they should have won.
Yeah. I think some people may have thought you were a college football playoff or bust person.
I like tracking the playoff. I think that's a very fun extra element to the season. If you can't get excited for 4-1 JMU playing 4-1 Coastal Carolina Thursday night at a whiteout with a sellout on national TV, then you're probably a fair weather fan. Like
Yeah.
that's a sick game.
I 100% agree with you. I just wanted to be the devil's advocate there because I imagine there's some people like, well, Bennett, you were one of the college football playoff or bust people. And after the game, I think it was also a very fair reaction to go, there goes the college football playoff hopes. Like, while also on the same side of the same coin, still be like, for me, I'm speaking from, this is kind of the therapy session. For me, in the wake of that loss, my initial reaction was, we really just lost our college football playoff hopes to ULM. Like, this is a team that came into the year at what, 2.5 win total. They're rebuilding with Brian Vincent, like a total rebuild. They won no games in 2020. They won 4 games in 21, 4 games in 22, 2 games last year. Like, this is not a good program. Historically, not a good program. They're the butt of so many jokes. And that's who we lost our college football playoff hopes to. That was my initial reaction coming out of that loss. Then there's a portion of me that is also like, I don't think it needs to be said that, yeah, the Sun Belt Championship's still well in reach. The standard is the quote still standard, and the standard is winning Sun Belt titles. It's just a real bummer that now in week 6 of the season, the college football hopes are kind of gone. And I'm not saying this is like, I'm not saying the season's a failure. There's still a lot of things that can go JMU's way for them to make the college football playoff, but like controlling their own destiny is now out of the question. And that was my initial reaction after that loss. It's just like, oh man, this is a real bummer. But now, you know what? I'm super excited for this game against Coastal, and I'm super excited for the mini bye week and then Georgia Southern the next week. This is, I didn't think it would be, but this is a massive stretch of the schedule now. All of a sudden, these games mean everything because now not only is it 2 East teams, which means so much, they're 2 Sun Belt teams that means so much. And in a blink of an eye, you can be right back at the top of the Sun Belt standings, or in the blink of an eye, then this is what makes it so fun because these games matter so much. In a blink of an eye, you can be shit out of luck by mid-October.
It's fascinating, and I think the one, I guess, like, overarching point I would like to make is there were some people who were like, "Hey, like, some of these fans are overreacting. Nothing's off the table." If you're 1 game into conference play, having played ULM, and the thing you're having to say is that nothing is off the table, that's a disappointing result, right? Like, "Hey, everything's still possible." Well, yeah, they're 1 game in. Like, it would be possible regardless, but to put yourself in a hole with that loss, knowing you still have to go to Georgia Southern, knowing that ODU is, like, playing sneaky good ball for a 1-4 team.
Damn right
You
they are. My Monarchs, baby. My
you gotta
dark
go
horse
to
pick.
you gotta go to them. They end the year with at ODU, at App State, against Marshall. Those are all like a semblance of rivalry there. Like, that's gonna be hard.
And I've been harping on it at App, at ODU. Both teams are coming off of bye weeks.
Yeah, and then, like, at Georgia Southern, I thought, like, coming into the last couple of games, I thought that would be the one where they tripped up. Like, I think that's a very losable game. So I guess the point that I think is frustrating for some fans is, like, sure, the East is not off the table, but that's a really bad start to wanting to win the East.
Very bad. And it's still on the table. And I honestly think to win the Sun Belt, they still control their own destiny. There's a real shot that the winner of the Sun Belt East is a 2 or 3 loss conference team.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, there truly nothing is off the table. I think it's weird when fans are like, "Why are people getting upset?" Probably because they didn't want to be thinking about things not being off the table. They wanted to
I,
think about all the things that were on the table at 5-0, which was like receiving votes before a
yeah,
national TV game. Like, you play well against Coastal, they would have been ranked, I think, that next week if they were
true. They could
undefeated.
have been, if they blew out ULM 50-7, they're likely 25th.
Or really close, right? If they're not 25th, because they were already, whatever, they were in line of receiving
Yeah.
votes. So, yeah, I mean, it's fair to be frustrated. I just think it's, in the past, I think I've made the mistake of being like, fans shouldn't react like that. Fans shouldn't react like that. It's like, I don't think we should, that was probably immature of me. And the message board guys probably have a point. I think fans like policing fandom is probably a waste of everyone's time. So I just like, if people are upset, that's fair. If people are looking ahead and excited, that's fair. I think the only thing that really stood out to me as kind of strange was the reaction of like, man, like it's not even worth it if we don't go to playoff. I think that fundamentally misunderstands why they joined the Sun Belt.
Yes, because also they joined the Sun Belt before they expanded the playoff. And when it was a 14 playoff, like it was never a shot that JMU was ever going to sniff a college. They're still very, you know what's very much in play? A good bowl in December. Maybe we go down to Georgia. Maybe Florida's looking nice that time of year, and we can have ourselves a great time in a fun bowl that we can win. We can win the Sun Belt still. Would be a fantastic championship game against, who knows, ULM. If they win the West and Bennett
Shout out
makes
to the
his
collective, then they'll be making some moves.
yeah, with your $500, big move.
I think that gets you like at least a game out of like a backup DB.
Maybe, who then redshirts after 4 games into the season. But let's go back to kind of the overarching game of it, where
Yeah, sorry for derailing us.
you're fine. They fall 21-19. We kind of went over the recap. Can I kind of go over some offensive issues here?
Yeah, hit me.
So yesterday, while I was waiting for you to finish up your round of golf, I got into a really deep PFF rabbit hole, which
Dark rabbit hole.
Coach dark rabbit hole. A lot of people know of that. But Coach, a Twitter account that if you're not following, highly recommend following. He also went down, it looked like the same rabbit hole.
Yeah,
and
you guys were both tweeting the same stuff.
There was something out in the ether where it brought us to this. But against ULM, Barnett was blitzed. So that means they bring more than 4. According to PFF, was blitzed on 58% of his dropbacks, which is an insane number. And just to kind of extrapolate it out a little bit, to kind of go away from the ULM game and kind of on the broader strokes, in all of their bad performances, Charlotte, Gardner-Webb, and now ULM, they have been blitzed over 50%. In their 2 great performances, UNC and Ball State, UNC blitzed 37.5% of the time, and Ball State blitzed only 17.9% of the time. So just an interesting little trend that's going there. But he was blitzed on 58% of his dropbacks. The offensive line did a very good job of only allowing 13 pressures on his 53 dropbacks. The issue is when he was pressured, Barnett was sacked 3 times. He scrambled once for a touchdown, which was the opening drive touchdown. And then he had 5 throwaways, which means 55% of all of his throws when pressured were just thrown away. Like, didn't even give his receivers a chance to get it. The ULM blitz, while they may not have gotten pressure, I think it rattled the redshirt sophomore quarterback just a little bit more so than it may have in other games.
They also didn't. So watching it back, some of it is like they didn't know where the blitz was coming from, which is partially them not picking it up correctly, and then partially ULM like did some, I thought, some really nice disguised blitzes watching it back. So I think Ernest Hill is their defensive coordinator. Looked him up. He had been at UAB for a bit, and then was like just a filthy good high school football coach. He might be a name that's like just leading like a group of 5 power in like 4 years. So keep an eye on him. I think he's a really good coordinator who did a nice job here. But there's a few where JMU didn't have the pressure called out correctly. I also thought some of the play calls, they would have like a receiver. And I think Delvin was asking for like these option routes. And it seemed like a few times they did run them where Petaway or somebody would go in, read a player, make a little move, and then go to the side. And by the time they got open to the side, Barnett was on his butt or throwing the ball away because the pressure had already came. There weren't a ton of like, boom, like that pass is open. They have a quick pass ready. They have like that hot route ready to go. It didn't seem like, which I thought was confusing. And then the lack of like running back and tight end screen to take advantage of the fact that so much pressure was coming up, I thought was a little bit surprising. I thought that would have made a lot of sense. And I think they're going to need a better plan in the future to embrace pressure and counteract it and use it almost as a way to gain an advantage with the pressure coming up and then getting behind it.
2 screens were thrown against ULM. He went 2 for 2, 12 yards, a first down.
One of them was the little one to Dollison, right? Like the receiver screen that went for like 2 yards and broke his streak.
Yeah.
I can't remember the other one now.
But the other one was a 10-yard gain, which would make
Okay.
sense because it's 2 yards and he went 2 for 2. But I mean, my major point is like, yeah, they didn't use screens all that often. And when you're blitz at a 58% clip, I would like to see that be something you incorporate a little bit more, or at least quicker routes, because he had on the season, his time to throw is 3.74 seconds, which is 1.5 seconds longer than his non-pressured time to throw, which means they don't really have a quick game that they can utilize at an effective way. And when he does get pressured, he's running around looking to make that kind of superhero type play because they don't have a quick hot and they don't have any screens really called.
Yeah, and some of it's frustrating too because I don't know if Kennedy is just sort of on the sideline, like staring angrily at his iPad. Because there are a couple plays where if they do pick up the blitz correctly, like it's a touchdown or a huge gain, and I don't know if that's the disguise is so good or if the offensive line missed a check or if Barnett missed something. Like I don't know exactly who's missing the call or if it's just a great disguise and they thought they called it right and ULM showed stuff they didn't show on film, which is certainly possible. And I'll break this down in a film study that'll go live later today, Wednesday, on JMUSportsNews.com. But like they're up 10-0. They've got this early drive of 4th and 4 where they could have kicked a field goal. They're going for it. Taylor Thompson and George Pettaway are both wide open for touchdowns, and Barnett gets sacked because they had one guy. It was 5-on-5. They had 2 linemen blocking one guy, and a linebacker came free directly up the middle untouched. So,
yeah. That brings quickly to 4th down decision making. I'm off. Chesney's testing me, man. He's testing me because I am all for aggressive 4th down decisions. But man, sometimes I wish he settled for the field goal in a 2-point game.
They go 1 of 5 on 4th down in the game. Some of those are late where it's like 4th and 10 and they have to because the game's about to end. So I'm not going to put a ton on that. Like the last 4th down, I think, was like pressure and Alonzo threw it away, which you'd like to see him keep it in play on the last play of the game. So that's a teachable moment. But at the same time, him throwing a jump ball when they're 70 yards from the end zone wouldn't have done anything. It probably would have just been like picked. But like there's some early in the game. The sack is a pretty good play design. You can question the decision. Certainly, they didn't have the right protection for the blitz. There's some others. They had a 4th and 2 they were going to go for, and there was a false start that made it 4th and 7, so they punted. Like there's a number of mistakes that were there that weren't executed the way they needed to. I think the one conversion, maybe, I think it was either 3rd or 4th down where they hit Taylor Thompson on that last drive where they needed a touchdown. Ended up getting that with Purdy on the running play, but Thompson had a really nice conversion there. I don't hate the decision making. I think this is a game though where they could have been more conservative just because ULM doesn't really have an offense.
Do you want to hear his post game comments about the 4th down decision making?
Oh yeah, this is with Brigert.
Couple of 4th down conversions you try and go for and still struggling with that. Is there a common denominator on why you're struggling on 4th downs?
I don't know. I'll go back and check the tape on why. Do we always struggle on 4th down? Do we suck on 4th down? Is that what you're saying?
Well, you're 4 for 13, I think, now in the season,
Okay.
So that's not very good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I got to go watch.
Well, is there a chance? Is there something that obviously you feel confident in what you're doing on?
Well,
4th down,
you're 4th and 1. What do you want to do? Punt there? You're out of field goal range, and you can't punt either.
Well, I'm
right?
even talking in the first half when it's 4th and 4.
Yes, but you're out of field goal range, and you can punt if you'd like to, but you also want to have a chance to be aggressive and stay aggressive and try to trust your guys to make those plays. And I think that's really ultimately where we just have to execute a little bit better.
And I wanted to ask you about the kick.
They, for the record, they were not out of field goal range on that 4th and 4.
They were not on the same page on which 4th down he was talking about. The 4th and 4 was from the ULM like 22 or 23, so it would have been a 39 or a 30 or a 40-yard field goal to go up 13-0. That's the one where they didn't pick up the protection. So I mean, again, they designed a touchdown play, didn't pick up the protection, and it leads to a sack. And I kind of missed this and sort of stumbled over it in the film study and sound like a moron, but I'm not cutting it. But It was like a late hit on that play. Did they get rid of that flag, or they kept that flag but said it was after the play on Barnett, so it was still ULM's ball?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be.
It was during the play. He wasn't down yet, so I was surprised they didn't call that as like an unnecessary roughness rather than like a late hit.
Yeah, they called it. They called it unnecessary roughness post play, 15 yards after, 15 yards from where they were taking over. So it was still a penalty, but it didn't impact the play.
Possession,
which
right? Yeah,
I thought was a very interesting.
I thought he was up. Like I didn't think his knee had gone down. Maybe they are claiming that like forward progress, so they had blown it.
Maybe this is us just being mad at calls as like the losing team, but it felt like even if his knee was down, it was still a roughing the passer, which isn't a post play penalty.
Maybe they're saying because he had already been sacked. I don't know, but that one I thought was confusing. Chesney reacted like they were keeping possession on that, so I think he was probably disappointed. But yes, the fourth down they were talking about, they were in field goal range. So that's what Dave was getting at. This is a number of quotes from Chesney where he's a little more fire up this week, which I love. Like I've been complaining about coach speak all year. Give me this, man. This is the Bob Chesney I want to hear from, where he's like, what are you saying? We suck on fourth down. I don't think they necessarily suck on fourth down, but I think they're 4 of 12. I don't think they've had the 13 attempts. I think they're 4 of 12, which is bad.
Not good. I think you tweeted it out. I think you tweeted out where they're surprisingly one of the top third down conversion teams in the nation and one of the better ones in the Sun Belt, but one of the worst on fourth down. So you got to wonder if with a larger sample as the season goes on, maybe that people always say regresses to the mean. And this is a complete side note and a pet peeve when they're talking about something getting better to go back to the mean, like you're below average and you need to regress to the mean, but wouldn't that be progress to the mean? Like regress regress is negative. So wouldn't you progress to the mean?
I guess so.
Okay. So they should eventually regress, progress, whichever one you want to say, to the mean eventually. But the fourth down decision-making and just kind of overall, I guess this brings us to this portion of the podcast. And I do, before I'm all over the place because there's so much to talk about here.
Much in our brain.
Let's talk coaching blunders. And then after this, I got to defend the offensive line a little bit.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to defend the coaches a little bit.
This is a back and forth. I put this loss squarely on coaching. I think, let me provide my opinion. And then you
I'm not jumping. Don't worry.
Okay. I think it's totally on coaching. I think Dean Kennedy lacked adjustments. You could see from the game script, the first few drive game script, it was successful. They scored, field goal, and then they were driving. And that very first fourth down they go for, I'm not blaming them for going for that one. You have the momentum, you can keep that going. And I think by getting that fourth down, if you get that, and then you continue to drive and score the touchdown, you break ULM's will, and you're just going to like destroy them for the rest of the game. That isn't how it worked out, but you still gain 53, 58 yards on that third drive. The script coming into the game worked. Brian Vincent and Ernest Hill made the necessary adjustments that JMU just did not have any answers for and could not adjust at all. Despite having George Pettaway run for 4.8 yards per carry, I would have loved to see him get the rock a little bit more. And in the first half, you seemingly completely abandoned the running back run game. 2 carries for George Pettaway, 2 for Tyler Purdy. That's mind-boggling to me. I think those guys need at least 5 to 7 carries if you're splitting the work 50% evenly, 5 to 7 carries each in the first half in a game that you're kind of leaning on them. You're doing a good job. Pettaway, 4.8 yards per carry. Heck, Wayne Knight, 1 carry for 16 yards, looked explosive. Would have loved to see more out of him. Where's Joby Mallory? The dude was a wrecking ball against Ball State. Interesting backfield decisions from the coaches. And that's mainly my biggest issue. You knew they were blitzing. They were blitzing more often than when you flip a coin. If you're getting heads or tails, you could go out there and you'd say blitz, 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 and you would be right 58% of the time. Why are you drawing up chunk plays? Why are you drawing up things when it's clear the design was working? Like you said, they had guys open for touchdowns, but the offensive line, the running backs, even Barnett, not picking up on where the pressure is coming from consistently. And you need to do that to have time to have your deep balls. Why was there no adjustments? Maybe there was. Maybe this is my fan brain talking, but it felt like there needed to be some more adjustments. There needed to be more screens, more runs, something to just slow down that blitz. And it never came. And I think that is a huge reason why JMU lost this game. Oh, and the onside kick. What are we doing? What is that? Not
Okay,
an
let's
onside
go
kick.
to that for a little
That's
bit.
stupid. I don't understand that. What are we doing? Apparently, Noe Ruelas is hurt.
Where's Rosa?
Cristiano wasn't kicking it. Ryan Hansen
Why?
kicked it. Apparently, they wanted to put spin on it, have it go away. No, it didn't spin at all. Why do we not just kick it deep? That right there cost you a lot. A lot of late game coaching blunders, and it felt like Brian Vincent was like riding a tricycle, doing laps around Bob Chesney, waving a flag, laughing at him.
I don't think it was that bad. I hear what you're saying. I think the other thing too is like there's a few spots where they could have done things differently. That early fourth down that I keep harping on, where if they score a touchdown that drive, it's 17-0. They make that protection check and snap the ball with 1 on the play clock. 3 timeouts, end of the first quarter, first half. Not opposed to a timeout there. I think they probably like the defensive look where it's like, we think this play is going to work, but they didn't get the protection right. Maybe if you call a timeout, they're able to figure something out and get a protection correct. I don't know. Easy to second guess. The onside kick did not make any sense. Okay, so that one
it wasn't an onside kick.
The spinny kick where he thought the ball would spin magically in a way that all of JMU's players would be rushing toward it while a stress returner was trying to pick up some like magic spinning top didn't make sense. So that one I thought was dumb. And the explanation was confusing where he's like, no way, didn't feel comfortable kicking, which I think means like injury stuff, right? Some people were confused. I know we had a few replies that are like, you didn't want to do it. He didn't feel comfortable. It wasn't like, no, it was like, I don't know if I can do it this time. Like, I think he's hurt, right? He's got the biggest leg they've had in program history in decades. It wasn't like he didn't feel comfortable kicking a ball. That's not what happened. I think it was like an injury thing. Anyway, so they don't go with him. Why they don't go with Rosa, who's like, isn't he listed as the primary kickoff guy? Or like is the primary kickoff guy? And they're like, we wanted to kick it deep, but no way couldn't do it. It's like, oh, what about the other guy? So they put Ryan Hansen out. They put the ball flat. They do this little thing. They didn't. I don't know.
Well, I think Rosa came out first to do it. Got flagged for the delay. That
was no way.
Was that no way?
No way moved the ball. Yeah, I think they wanted. I don't
maybe
know
the funniest delay of game I've ever seen because I feel like a kicker should know you're not allowed to change the ball after what.
It was all confusing, but then it didn't make a lot of sense how they handled it. It gave ULM really good field position. So then JMU starting its last drive where it needs to go down and get a field goal with horrible field position. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. Maybe they didn't fully trust the defense to go get a stop, and they wanted to have some sort of half onside kick to have a chance. The defense cooked. So that was a weird one to not be like, let's give them one last shot to like give us this edge and then get us into field goal range. If they had gotten into field goal range, would Noe have been the kicker? Because maybe a field goal wasn't even an option. I'm not sure. They also had that near interception that could have went the other way. There's so many opportunities where they could have went the other way and ended up winning, but they did not. As far as like the Dean Kennedy stuff, some of the stuff he was drawing up was not chunk plays. He was drawing up like short passes that the pressure was getting there so fast that it like wasn't even working. So I don't know if it's all on him for the blitz. I thought they abandoned the run too early too. And then watching some of it back, and you mentioned the 58% blitz rate, running into a blitz would also be dumb. So that's not like a foolproof system.
You're right, but then like, do you have George Pettaway? Get him on the outside. Like,
I think a screen or something, or like finding ways to get Pettaway the ball in space on like even passes would have made sense.
The offensive line also, and I know you didn't interrupt me, and I'm interrupting
Go ahead.
you, so I apologize. But your offensive line had your best run blocking grade of the season. Trust them to push forward, block the blitz, and give George Pettaway an opportunity to gain 5. I'm not asking to run for touchdowns. I'm saying if you can consistently gain 4 to 6 yards every rush, and your offensive line is playing its best it has all season against the like run blocking, come on, we need to lean into that more. And I think it'll slow down the blitz. And if you happen to break one, you're more likely to break one against a blitz.
It was not a perfect game plan. I also thought he game planned well enough for them to win. And I thought the decisions like on fourth down plus the execution didn't make like ULM had a game plan that seemed very like married together and made sense. Where it's like, all right, offense, like you're going to score as much as you possibly can, which we realize is, between 10 and 17 points. But they're going to win the West between 10 and 17 points. But they also wanted them to just get a few first downs to set up their punter to win the field position battle. They were playing field position and defense and then clinging on and hoping it would work. And it did, because they won the field position battle because JMU kind of played into it. And 2, they had a defensive touchdown. If they don't have a defensive touchdown, they lose. So they needed to win the field position battle. They needed to have JMU go for it on 4th down a lot and essentially fail every time. They needed JMU to fail a 2-point conversion. They needed JMU to give up a defensive touchdown so that they could win by 2 points at home. So like their game plan was crazy, but it worked. They did the only thing they could to hang in the game, and they did it. And it felt like JMU, like a lot of their decision making almost led into that, where it should have just been like, hey, if we don't turn it over and we kick some field goals and pin them deep on punts, we win. Like steal a page out of Cignetti, where I think if Cignetti's the coach, they win like 24-10 in an ugly game. We all whine about how they only won by 14 and they should have been more explosive, but he wins.
You're not wrong. Complete side note on coaching blunders, but on the ULM side, definitely with that last touchdown should have gone for 2.
Was there to go up? Oh, to take it up to 9 points instead of.
Yeah,
that would have been smart. Yeah, get it. It was 2 possessions.
When they didn't go for 2, I was like, oh, JMU's going to win this game because of this horrible play call by Brian Vincent.
In fairness, though,
they won
because JMU didn't get a 2-point conversion. So by kicking the extra point, you force them to go for 2, and then you let your defense get a 2-point conversion stop rather than your crappy offense.
Yes, but then but you also allowed JMU the opportunity to
get a game-winning field goal and everything.
Yeah.
But
here we are. To the losers come not the spoils.
Disappointing loss, winnable game. I understand the frustrations. I also think some of the stuff was a little overblown, where people are like, Chesney and these idiots, like the Patriot League boys aren't ready for the big stage. He's like 115 and 35 or 45 as a head coach. He's won everywhere he's been. He's had a streak dating back to like 2015 of his teams finishing 1st or 2nd in their conference. Like, was not perfect, but they're 4-1. They beat the crap out of UNC. They're gonna be fine.
And their defense is like legit. Maybe I'm more bullish on the defense, but like have not allowed more than 2 touchdowns in a single game outside of the UNC game. So against Group of 5 and FCF schools, who we should be comparing ourselves to, the Group of 5 schools at least, have not allowed more than 2 touchdowns. Great performances by the defense overall, and their takeaway masters, getting 2 in this game, winning the turnover battle, all of that. Before we move along, I do want to say I want to defend the O-line. I want to go on record here and say the offensive line is not the issue. I'm seeing them get a lot of unnecessary heat. They've only allowed 39 pressures this season. That's the 56th best in the nation out of 145 teams. That's pretty good for an offensive line that, like, Carter Sweezy, Tanner Morris, and Cole Potts are the returners. You're down your all-conference preseason player. They allow pressure on just 22% of dropbacks, 14th best in the nation. And even when they're blitzed heavily, like ULM, like Charlotte, like Gardner-Webb, they don't allow pressure at that high of a clip. In this ULM game, they allowed pressure on just 24.5% of the dropbacks. The issue, and it might be a twofold issue. Maybe it's the way PFF grades things and it doesn't fully align with the eye test. But for the most part, the offensive line isn't allowing pressure at a high clip, but Alonzo Barnett gets sacked at a high clip. He leads the nation among quarterbacks who've taken 100 snaps or more. Shout out coach for that stat, with a pressure to sack percentage at 35.9%. He's been sacked the most when under pressure, despite being pressured the 7th most out of any starting Sunbelt quarterback. He's been sacked the most. And that's kind of the issue. He's not getting pressured all that much, but when he does, he gets sacked.
I think it's because a lot of the pressures, and this is why the offensive line grade is so good, are unblocked dudes. Like, it's not like the offensive line is giving up pressures because the defensive end throws a guy to the ground. It's because they don't pick something up. And then it's not a bad offensive line grade because they're never locked into the block. But it's also hard if you have a free linebacker to not have that be a sack. Like if there's a free linebacker who's more athletic, much speedier, and better at tackling than like a 300-pound defensive tackle, I think it's harder to avoid that sack than an athletic dude coming right up the middle. So I think that's a lot of it. Like the offensive line's playing well. There's just something mixed up there where they don't have a great plan of attack for when a dude comes unblocked on a blitz, which is happening more than it should.
That's a good point. My pushback to that will be, well, that's the case for all of these offensive lines that PFF is grading, and Alonzo Barnett still ranks first in the nation in pressure to sack ratio.
But are they giving up that many unblocked
Free rushers?
Is there that many free rushers? Is there a way to see that? Because I think it's a big thing for him. He's got a lot of free rushers and maybe not a lot of like well-designed hot route stuff. I don't know.
That's a good point.
Because I like Alonzo, I don't think it's like his athleticism is an issue. He scrambled away 1,000,000 times. How many times was he sacked in this game?
Only three.
He should have sacked like 8 times.
That's a good point.
They got in there a lot. So I want to see how it goes against Coastal and Georgia Southern, because if you're a Sunbelt defensive coordinator, you put on the tape. My plan, and I'm not entirely sure who runs Ball State's defense, but the 17% blitz rate, maybe they didn't watch tape that week. I don't know. But like blitz them. Like that's plan is just going to be to blitz the man.
Blitz them and put 2 over the top safeties to take away the deep ball. Like I am kind of worried a little bit, and this Coastal game will show us a lot. I'm kind of worried JMU's the Dolphins of college football, where they're like really, really good at their one pitch. And the second you take it away, they have no changeup. They're a fastball only type of team that got them to a 4-0 start. I'm very intrigued to see I'm intrigued, one, if Coastal is like, oh, let's just copy and paste the same formula that ULM just won with.
So.
You would hope so. And then by thinking that, I'm very intrigued to see how JMU then responds. How do they handle being blitzed with a too high safety look? And how does Dean Kennedy scheme that open?
They did a few, though. They did a few where they're like, they didn't have a safety. Like the 4th and 4 I keep coming back to. They're blitzing. Logan Kyle's running right down the middle, and there's nobody back there.
That's a good point.
But the blitz came so fast. ULM also has the personnel. Like their defense is good. I'm going to give them some credit there. The reason I don't think they can win the West is because they don't have a functioning offense.
But their defense is good.
Is solid. So like Coastal's defense is worse than ULM's. So I do think they'll have a, which is crazy to say, but I do think they'll have at least an edge there where like it's not the same level of defensive scheme blitzing you.
JMU should run for 300 yards in this game, but we'll preview Coastal here in a minute. Anything else you want to get off your chest about the ULM game?
It was a disappointing loss. Fans have every right to be disappointed, I think. And then I guess you want to talk Chesney a little bit in News or Snooze.
I was going to say that brings us to everyone's favorite segment. News or Snooze. Presented by Cinnamon Bear Bakery and Deli. You can find them right across the street from the Atlantic Union Bank Center. Next time you're in Harrisonburg, or if you live in Harrisonburg, be sure to check out Cinnamon Bear. Thank you to them for sponsoring News or Snooze this football season. Bennett, hit me with your quotes.
All right. This is mostly just, I thought Bob Chesney, not that there's anything wrong with this. I thought he had a noticeable change in tone from previous weeks. I thought he was more fired up. I thought he was a little more maybe agitated. I thought he was he was short with some people, maybe a little frustrated, which as someone who enjoys consuming it and like works in sports media, yes. Like I've been clamoring for this all year, man. Like the coach speak is going away and he's just saying what he's feeling, which is my dream. It's more from the Signetti book. So I'm loving it. But they asked him, the Breeze asked, and he was Hayden Hunley, right? Asked about Chauncey Logan's status moving forward. So he basically said, like, asking about injury and then just his status, his availability, because Chesney, and this is important context, Chesney had said after the Ball State game, because somebody asked where Chauncey Logan was, and he said, he's good, he's fine. So the assumption then being that he would play against ULM. Chesney talked about losing one-on-ones against ULM. Some of those are cornerbacks who were filling in for Chauncey Logan. So like his presence would have been potentially outcome altering, I think. Would have been huge. Okay, so he doesn't play in that game. So then naturally that's going to be a question on Monday. So he asks about it, and Chesney says, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about that stuff. I don't want to really mention anything for those guys one way or another until they're ready to mention stuff. I have to just brush up on what I'm supposed to be saying in that moment. I have no clue. Nobody told me anything, he says as he turns to his right. And then his final part here, is that my job to alert everybody, go through the injury list?
You said that not as snarky as he said it.
It was more of, yeah, so I would go
in my opinion.
Yes.
I think his tone was very snarky and kind of like offended this question was asked.
He was definitely defensive about it, and his like, is that my job to alert everybody go through the injury list was not like it didn't sound confused.
It was also, so this is newsworthy because I think it's a marked change in how he's now handling these questions. You even heard it a little post game with Riggert and how he got a little snarky with the fourth down question. That's why I think it's newsworthy. Also with the fact that like immediately after this, Chauncey Logan then posted a picture to Twitter. Let me actually pull that up.
And he had done that before during ULM week as well. A similar post where he's like with a similar caption and a similar image. So it's the second week in a row he's posted something like this. I would say shortly after Chesney media availability.
Chauncey posted one, it was his birthday yesterday with all
Happy
this
birthday.
happening. So happy birthday to Chauncey Logan. But right afterwards, he tweeted this picture right back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. His most previous tweet that he tweeted himself was then after the press conference after Ball State going into the ULM game. So the week prior, blessed and highly favored, he makes no mistakes, right back to work. And he never got back to work. He was out, and now he's tweeting again right back to work right after it. But my issue with it was the fact that he didn't just like, I think there's so many ways he could have answered that question, and he chose maybe the worst way possible, where it's just like, if it's an injury, you don't have to give out specifics and just say, we're not talking about injuries at this time, or we're not like our program does not release injury information. Something along those lines. Instead, he's like, don't know if I can answer what he wants. I'll leave him to answer this. And it's just like kind of a lack of feeling what the landscape of college athletics is like when like every day we're hearing of another player who's played 4 games deciding to sit out the rest of the season to redshirt to enter the transfer portal to make more NIL money. And Chauncey Logan did enter the transfer portal with the coaching change. So there was some thoughts, I was included, that potentially that could be what was happening, because he didn't just come out and say, we're not talking about injuries. He was just like, I'm not answering that, or something just so vague.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Like, it's very reasonable for JMU fans to want to know if the best players on the team are available to play in the next game. So they want to know that information. So then the media is going to ask it. I think it's easiest if you're a coach to just come out and be very clear about your statuses. So, and some coaches want the competitive advantage of not saying injuries, which is fine. Like, I think I'm fine with that. A lot of people understand that. Certainly from my perspective, I prefer if every coach was super open. We're going to get to a point where injury reports are mandatory across college football if you're playing at the highest level. The SEC and Big Ten both have mandatory injury reports, with the SEC reporting multiple times a week. So I would expect that to go across sports. A lot of that is for betting, because sports bettors are often looking for inside information, and they're sort of asking these players like what their teammates' availability is. Guaranteed that's happened at JMU, where people have seen so-and-so in a class, like in a boot or something, gone to bet online and placed money like for or against the Dukes. Like, I'm sure that has happened. So like the inside information, people are always kind of looking for that. It makes sense to have injury reports, but the Sun Belt does not. Chesney does not have to give out any information on player availability, but they're going to ask. People want to know if Io Adai is going to play at running back. He hasn't played since the second game. He was supposed to be the best running back on the team, had 1,000 rushing yards in the American last year, right? Tyshawn Wyatt was like a preseason second team offensive lineman. Hasn't played this year. People want to know if he will play this season, just like they want to know if Chauncey Logan's going to play, just like they want to know why Carter Sweezy left the ULM game after 5 snaps and the left guard performance the rest of the game was not as good as it has been the entire season. They're all reasonable questions. I think if you're Chesney, the best way to handle it is to, one, either be like, we don't reveal injury information, like appreciate you asking, but you're not going to find that out all year until Saturday. Fair. Or be like, just say player availability. I saw like Shane from the DNR had tweeted that it could be a HIPAA violation. No one's asking him to pull out Chauncey Logan's medical history and be like, when Chauncey was 8 years old, he had this surgery. When Chauncey was 14, his wisdom teeth were removed by this doctor at this time. Like, nobody wants to know that, or like what prescriptions he's taking. You can say if a player is available or not. That's not a HIPAA violation. So if you're claiming it's like a HIPAA thing, I think you're acting in bad faith. He could have been more clear about what's happening and squashed any potential speculation.
It's also just very easy to answer that question, something along the lines of, we thought we were going to get Chauncey back for the ULM game. The injury or the situation, whatever word you want to put there, didn't resolve itself the way we thought. We don't know the status of any of our injury players until Saturday, or something along those lines, to kind of be like, he's injured, but we don't know when, like, but we're not going to give any more information with that. Like, he may be back this Saturday, he may not. And then I think the funniest thing of it all is then the two deeps are released, and then Chauncey's a starter, but he was a starter last week. Taji Hudson's been a starting wide receiver, but hasn't gotten starting wide receiver snaps or like targets. And it's just funny how he uses that two deep too. Like, he just does not use that two deep.
Yeah, I mean, they seem more concerned about the reliability of two deeps in August, I guess. But maybe that's something that isn't as important midseason. I'm frustrated with how they've handled some of that stuff, because fans are going to ask, and then fans are certainly going to speculate if a top player like is leaving in the portal or whatever. I can't remember. I think he is. I think he's under the collective too, right? So I think they posted him. I want to say Chauncey's involved with the collective in some capacity. But it's like, people want to know. People want to know if the best players are going to play in the game, and that's fair for them to want to know. It's also fair for Chesney to want the competitive advantage of not saying. I just thought it was weird when he was like, is that my job? Like, yes, the head coach of the program making almost $1 million annually, it is your job to provide status updates on players.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, no, it's just, is that my job? Do you want someone else to handle that?
And I mean, like, I don't even care that much. Like, if it doesn't affect me, like, if I know that Chauncey's playing on Thursday, like, it's not going to change my week. I'm not going to like have a better Wednesday because Chauncey's playing. I love Chauncey Logan. He's like one of my favorite players and has been for multiple seasons. But I don't know. Like, it doesn't, like, if he just says, hey, I'm giving out that information on Thursday, everyone's gonna be like, okay.
It also then just stops it stops the questions too, which seem to be like a thorn in his side. All right. So that one's newsworthy. What's next?
Okay. I do want to talk about the music a little bit.
Oh, well, actually,
no, let's do the music. Did you tweet a full music quote?
I tweeted, yes. Let me pull it up for you. Let me help.
I'll find it.
Yeah, your Wi-Fi might.
I thought it was for some reason I thought it was media, but it wasn't. Wasn't media. Did you tweet from personal?
No, I tweeted from the main account, the JMU Sports News account. This is great podcasting.
I found it. Sorry. Okay. Chesney said, that's something we're talking about every single day and working every single day. If we can get some louder music out here, I'm not sure. So Chesney was talking about pre-snap penalties, the false starts, and how there was music. He had also said post-game that it's a decent environment here. He said about ULM, there's music playing almost through the cadence. It was a loud setup in here. Thoughts on those quotes?
That's something we're talking about every day and working every single day. If we can get some louder music out here, I'm not sure. That last part, if we can get some louder music out here, he kind of like looked and smiled. And that's more so saying, I think, like, they want to crank the speakers up as loud as humanly possible so they can get used to it.
Right.
With the ULM stuff, that's ULM, man. They said it was a reported 19,900 or something like that. So around 20,000 fans. That's not true because the entire upper bowl was empty at that stadium. But whatever. They had a very engaged marching band. Shout out marching band. They're typically your most engaged fans, typically your loudest fans. And they had a great marching band section that was set up on the side of the field that JMU was driving towards in the fourth quarter. That's massive for them. Yeah, they probably did play music up into the snap and things of that sort. And me and Delvin talked about this on To the House. Technically, you're supposed to stop when they come to the line of scrimmage, but you don't. And you push the boundaries. You waiting for the ref to either give you a warning, or sometimes I would imagine coaches talk with the band directors and are like, we'll let you go until we get a flag. Like, because they will flag the team and it'll be a 15-yard penalty. I'd imagine some coaches, maybe Brian Vincent, the way he's so like gung-ho about community, may have talked with the band and be like, go up until they give you a flag. The referees never brought him in. So, okay, keep playing. Play through the snap until you get in trouble. Like, that's a home field advantage. It's kind of worrisome to me that like they had that many false starts and like they weren't blaming the music, but it seemed like it was a scapegoat.
Yeah, I think I go back and forth on this. My thing is I thought he took a little more heat than he needed to on this because they asked him why there were false starts. He then explained what was throwing them off and said they were going to work on it. And everyone's like, wow, this guy is okay with the false starts. And it's like at no point in his comment was he like, these are acceptable. They played music. What are you going to do? It was more of a like, they played music that maybe we weren't expecting. It threw off our cadence. We didn't adjust well enough. We're going to work on it at practice in X, Y, and Z. I thought it was a pretty normal response that people were just mad. I think people were more mad at the false starts. So there's nothing Chesney could say other than like, standard is the standard. This can't happen, which is like a stupid quote that would have appeased people.
Yeah.
What's he supposed to say?
Yeah, you're right. I think Shane Metlin had a great follow-up answer though, where he was like, you had these false starts at ULM. Like you're going to be going to some very aggressive places. Like Boone, hopefully Boone is able to host some games with everything that happened after Helene. But App State's on the calendar, Georgia Southern, ODU, if they can like kind of turn a corner, they'll have fans there. If not, that'll be empty. But maybe empty stadiums are the issue because ULM did not have 20,000 people there. They had a raucous atmosphere because of the band, because of the student section, but that was not 20,000 people. I'm sorry. They're pulling a page out of the Troy playbook of we're going to fake report our numbers. But I think that was a valid follow-up.
Yeah.
Where
some of it,
like,
some of it is like the guys are jumping. Like the defensive line would shift and somebody would jump. And like Chesney knows that, but he's not going to go in front of the media and be like, well, they have to stop jumping. Like it's a really tough question to answer in a way that would please any fans. To explain away 5 false starts is almost impossible. That was my thing, which I think the more concerning thing is less his comments about it and the fact that like they had 5 false starts.
Yeah, you're not wrong on that one. All right, what's the last one?
Last one, I think I'll do the post-game win expectancy and whether you think that's newsworthy or not. So the stats award graph shows that JMU outplayed ULM, right? They had like 150 more total yards. They won the turnover battle. Bill Connolly's post-game win expectancy, I think it was like ULM won the game with a post-game win expectancy of like 19.7%, which I think, if I'm not interpreting it incorrectly, is that like typically if you see those kind of like box scoring numbers, that kind of success rate, that sort of stuff, JMU would win the game like 80+% of the time.
Yeah. If you played that game 100 times, ULM is winning it 19.
Thoughts?
I think it's snoozeworthy, but it is fun. I mean, I do love my nerd stats, the advanced stats, all that stuff. It is fun to be like, oh, they did win the game in every statistical category, but the one that matters. Like that's a cool like consolation prize. But you got to finish. You got to not have the false starts. You got to score more than 19.
Yeah. Got to finish. Can't give up defensive touchdowns, man. That'll kill you.
Offensive touchdowns. No defensive touchdowns. You're right.
Well, either. I mean, ideally.
you're not wrong.
Or
Ideally.
special teams. But they have, I think that's kind of interesting to me, is they did give up a special teams touchdown to UNC, and now they've given up a defensive touchdown. So 2 of the last 3 weeks, they've given up non-offensive touchdowns, which is hard to win that way.
True. Good point. That's exactly right. All right. Game tomorrow. Coastal Carolina comes to town, ESPN2.
Absolutely.
Big time national televised game. It's going to be a big night. To make this all about me really quick.
Yeah, anytime you can get in there and make it about yourself, you should.
Yep. Going to be a big night for me. Seahawks play as well. So this has the potential to be one of the best Thursday nights of my life because I do put too much stock into my team's winning, of course. Could be one of the best Thursday nights I've ever had. Could be one of the worst Thursday nights I've ever had. We'll see how both these games play out. Coastal Carolina, though, comes to town. They bring a 4-1 record into this one. Their lone loss of the season was against UVA, where UVA just ran all over them up and down the field down in Conway, South Carolina. But the Chanticleers have a good offense.
They do.
Ethan Vasco won the starting quarterback competition in fall camp, took it over. Was it Noah Kim out of Michigan State? Beat him in it. And now Ethan Vasco, kind of this dual threat quarterback that's leading a potent Coastal Carolina offense, but their defense leaves a lot to be desired. What do you expect in this game, Bennett?
Yeah, I've never seen a team waste a Power 4 home game quite like Coastal did against UVA. I don't know how much you watched or if you watched any of the highlights. They fumbled the opening kickoff and led to like an immediate UVA touchdown, and it just never got better. But they're not bad. Like Vasco's playing decently well. They hit a lot of chunk plays. I think they have like 17 passes of 30 plus yards this year, which is second in the country. So they're explosive. Vasco doesn't take a lot of sacks, which JMU seems like they have some pressure merchants who aren't sack guys, at least so far. So you want to pressure Vasco and make him make a bad decision, but it is hard to get him on the ground for sacks. He gets the ball out quick. He can throw deep balls. They have a few guys that are, I would say, Dawson-esque in terms of some of their stats, where it's like they might only catch 2 balls a game, but they're going for like 60 combined yards. So they like to go deep. They like to do that. Vasco can run. I don't think their rushing offense is all that scary. Defense isn't very good, but they're fine. Like, I think they're competitive. They're going to be competitive at the group of 5 level. They're not like, you're not playing Boise State. You're not playing an ACC team. It's a winnable home game. At the same time, like, Coastal's going to go to a bowl game. They're solid. They probably got some revenge on their mind. So it's not a gimme, especially on a short week.
Yeah. I mean, JMU has dominated the Chanticleers the last 2 years. Funny enough, Grayson McCall was there the last 2 years, but it's been Ethan Vasco as the quarterback the last 2 years
right.
when JMU plays Coastal. I'm very intrigued to see how this game goes, because Coastal's going to want to come in and get some revenge for the last 2 years. But then JMU is also going to want to avenge the loss to ULM and come out. I think this game has the potential to be kind of a heavyweight, like big blow after big blow, not necessarily on the scoreboard, but like big hit, suffocating run, like things that maybe won't show up on the scoreboard, but will make this game so much fun to watch.
And not to overblow it, but like, you lose this game, you're not winning the East, man.
You could still.
Yeah, nothing's on the table. You lose this game, you are not winning the East. You got to win this one. This is, I would say, must win, because over the next 2, you got to at least go 1-1. That Georgia Southern game is going to be brutal. You're going to mini bye, but like Clay Helton's got them rolling. They're good offensively. They've got some guys who can play defense. They'll blitz the heck out of you on the road. That one's going to be tough. That one's going to be, seems like it's going to be tough all year.
So, keys to a win against Coastal Carolina. You wrote a great article over on JMUsportsnews.com laying out 3 keys to the game. One of them that is the most interesting to me is Vasco and forcing him to the left. When he has the opportunity. What was that?
Sorry.
What was that?
I'll show you in a second.
Okay. Vasco, when he has the opportunity to go right, he's fantastic. If JMU can make him go left, he's not very good. That was a very interesting, great stat pull, Bennett.
Yeah, he's been really good going one way, so I think you want to try to change that if you can. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but you'd like to do it. Can you see this?
Yes.
Day man. Fighter of the night man. Champion of the sun.
This is what JMU needs. JMU is going to need, right now,
Day
they're
man?
a day team. They are a day team. So whatever's going on, they're going to have to slay this giant, the night man, okay? Because they've been horrible at night. This is a night game. You need to come. Did you hear what PJ Fleck did for Minnesota before they beat USC?
Turn the lights off.
They took an antidote of confidence. So I don't know if he knows exactly how antidotes work, but he had them take these. He had them take these little pills.
What if he
with-
said anecdote?
They
Confidence anecdotes.
He had them take these little pills that had like or something, some sort of concoction. Maybe it was a drink. They had like Sprite in it and some other shit, and he said that like changed their vibe. That they were like all feeling confident after like very coachy silliness. Tony Bennett did this once after UVA finally beat a 16 seed in Gardner Webb, even though they were down at half. He had like a stuffed monkey, and he took it off his back, and they threw the stuffed monkey on the floor. Got the monkey off their back after losing to UMBC. JMU needs to figure something out with this night-day stuff because they're a great day team right now. They've struggled at night. I don't know how real any of this is, but I would love to see them maybe they take a confidence pill. Maybe they have like somebody dress up like the day man from Always Sunny, and maybe they turn the lights even brighter. Maybe they have a fake sun on the sideline. It's a whiteout, which is bright, which I like, right? So maybe it's like, oh, it's the daytime. Like they get confused because the crowd's all in white, but they got to play like it's a day game.
JMU did score their 10 points while the sun was still out against ULM.
Are they? Maybe they're not nocturnal. I don't know, but then put the lights on really bright.
But this goes back to what I was teasing at the top of the episode an hour and 15 minutes ago.
Yes.
Delvin and I talked about it post pod on Sunday night after we recorded To the House, which you can find on the JMU Sports News Network. That there is a little bit to it, not just from like a body way of like during the noon kickoff against UNC, you wake up, you eat, you warm up, you play. For night games, you wake up, you eat, you sit around, you eat, you sit around, you eat, and then you warm up and then you play. He did bring up a fact of like you practice during the day, and especially for quarterbacks. And he didn't say for wide receivers, but I feel like it also applies to wide receivers a little bit. When you're practicing inside of Bridgeforth, you're practicing during the day. So all of your like mental things, and it becomes very much just muscle memory and just doing things without thinking. It's with the sun involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then night, the lights are different. The lights aren't where the sun is. The light is hitting you differently. There's just different aspects from a visual cue standpoint than what it is during the day. And he said that could be potentially something throwing them off. But it is funny how stark of a difference this team is from day and night. It's an extremely small sample, 3 night games, 2 day games, but 1,100 yards of offense, 133 total points, and Alonzo Barnett is vying for the Heisman when it's daytime. When it's nighttime, they might as well be a pumpkin for Halloween.
Well, I also think that our friend Dom Palumbo had pulled the numbers, and Chesney only coached like 5 night games at Holy Cross, and they were 3-2. So he was 42-19 in the others, the day games. So he's all about routine and getting stuff from other teams. He doesn't have a lot of experience coming into this year coaching at night games. Again, small sample size. I don't know that the coaches or anyone would buy into this, but it's something to at least monitor because it has been a crazy difference when they play a day game versus a night game, and somewhat funny that they were like just on fire with the sun and then it went down and it was like, So I don't know exactly what went wrong.
Also worth noting, the Bucknell game last year was a night game for Barnett.
That was a night game for Barnett. So. That is so maybe there's a night game thing.
All right. Anything else you got to add?
No, it's a winnable game, but it's not a gimme. Huge 2 weeks coming up. I'm excited for it. There's a lot left to play for, obviously. 1 week at a time, get through it. But the Coastal game, some of that's just like bragging rights, wanting to look good on national TV, wanting to reinsert yourself as like the best team in the East. Like there's a pride factor here.
I think if JMU goes out and dominates this game the way they have the last 2 years against the Chanticleers, it'll shut up everyone and we'll be back in on the bandwagon. I can guarantee you if we win 50-14, this podcast next week will be talking about the scenarios to make it back into the college football playoff discussion.
I will not personally, but I mean, if you want to,
all right.
Hey, I will revisit my take that they aren't getting in if they go 2-0 the next 2 weeks. Cause I do think if they can get through Georgia Southern, they have a chance to go into November looking pretty darn good. But if people haven't watched Boise State and Ashton Genty tape, put it on.
91 carries, over 1,000 yards rushing.
He is, oh man, he's really fun to watch.
Averaging over 10 yards at carry. Insane stuff. All right. So a quick wrap up before we get up on out of here. We got some good news. We got some bad news. Good news. JMU's ranked number 8 in the latest men's soccer top 25. Awesome stuff. Some bad news. They fell in a 1-0 heartbreaker. A late own goal was the difference that propelled the UVA Cavaliers to a win over the 8th-ranked Dukes. First loss of the season for JMU. Back to the good news. Field hockey, very good in the MAC. This is a team that was kind of looked like they had lost their way the last few years. Not anymore. They are unbeaten in the MAC.
That's exactly right.
All right. Anything else you got to add? Oh, Matt Barry's coming to town with Sports Center.
And he will call the game. It's him, Mullen, and then Harry Lyles on the sideline. That's a darn good trio. And then women's soccer's playing well. They're, I think they're still unbeaten in league play. So
that's right. My apologies for missing that one.
Keep on cooking. Volleyball, tough start this year. We'll see if they can rally a little bit, but
split the weekend against Georgia State.
Yeah, a lot to like across the JMU landscape. And exciting news: Mike Barber is going to be writing a little JMU football stuff for the athletic department on Thursday, covering JMU Coastal, which is a nice ad for them. Excited to have that content coming as well.
We love Barber. So for Bennett Conlon, I'm Jack Fitzpatrick. Thank you so much for tuning into the JMU Sports News podcast presented by Bet Online. You can find this podcast and To the House on the JMU Sports News Network, available wherever you find your podcast. Be sure to rate and subscribe on whatever podcast feed you use. We're also on YouTube. Just type in JMU Sports News Network in the YouTube search bar and we'll come on up. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe over there. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys next week. Mini buy edition as Bennett gives us a creepy smile. See ya.